Hi everyone, this is Jessica Ward from the Florida Literacy Coalition. I hope everyone can hear me okay. We are going to go ahead and get started. It's just about 2 o'clock, and if people join in, that's fine. But since we do have it scheduled for excuse me, a whole hour and a half, I want to make sure we try and start on time. I see most of you, when you logged in, were able to put your name in. If for some reason, there should be an option for you to actually type in your first and last name. If you didn't get that option, let me know just via the chat, and I can try and troubleshoot with you. But I think most of you were able to actually put your name in when you signed in, which will be my proof of your participation. Somebody asked on the chat feature if they could get proof of participation. If you would like it, please just make sure you email me. I'm the one who sent you that email yesterday with the login information, so you can just respond to that email to let me know what you need. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to ask that everybody please make sure you're not going to be using your mics during this, so the only person talking will be Dr. Corley, and that way, because we are expecting quite a few people on the webinar, and it'll just be a lot easier that way. If you do have a question, we ask that you use the chat feature, and it seems like most of you have already figured that out. And what we'll do is we'll try and get to the questions when you type them. If we somehow miss them, we'll save them to the end, and Dr. Corley can answer any of those questions. I just want to give you a quick bio. So most of you probably already saw this because you signed up for the webinar, but Dr. Marianne Corley will be facilitating for us today, and she is a principal research analyst for the American Institutes for Research in Washington, D.C. She directs the Teaching Excellence in Adult Literacy project. We shorthand call it TEAL. And her focus has been on evidence-based writing instruction, which is what we're going to be covering today. And just a quick preview of our session, we have our title is Helping Your Adult Literacy Students Increase Their Writing Fluency. And we're going to briefly review the findings from current research on effective writing instruction, and we will discuss how these findings can apply to classroom instruction. It'll cover some practical instructional strategies such as reducing students' reluctance to write, helping students with pre-writing, and using frames as an aid. So very excited about this. So we will go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Dr. Corley.
Okay, good afternoon, and I'm pleased to be with you. I do have a question. Jessica, there's a video that's appeared on my screen, and I can't X out of it. Can somebody do something about that? It's right over the PowerPoint, and there's no way to X out of it.
Dr. Corley, so it looks like somebody has their video feature open. Whoever does, please close it. Unfortunately, I can't close it because it's not here on my I didn't open it on my screen. So somebody, thank you, whoever did that. Yeah, so Dr. Corley will be speaking, and if you just follow along with the slides, I think you'll get all the information that you need.
Thank you so much. Okay, good afternoon. I'm pleased to be with you today to talk about how to help your students increase their writing fluency. As Jessica said, please do ask questions in the chat feature, and I may not be watching that the whole time while I'm talking, but we'll take a few pauses so I can read and see if there are questions. Okay, let's get started. She told you that I am part of the TEAL project, Teaching Excellence in Adult Literacy. Just a brief overview. We worked with 12 different states for 3 years. Florida was one of those states, but we had only 4 teachers and a state professional development coordinator as part of this. We taught them a whole lot about teaching excellence across the content areas, and then we worked with them specifically on writing strategies that are evidence-based. They tried them out in their classrooms, and they were mostly delighted with the responses that they got from their students. So we'll talk about that and see if you might try to either, if you're using some of these strategies already, please share, and if not, maybe by the end of this session you'll set a plan for trying one or more of these strategies. So let's get going. The objectives. By the end of this session, I hope you'll be able to describe some strategies that grab your students' attention and increase their writing practice. We all know that our students are intimidated by the idea of putting pen or pencil to paper and writing, and there are reasons for that that we'll talk about. And what we want to do is make writing interesting to them without being threatening, and there are ways to do that. We're going to talk about various writing frames and how you can use them to help your students who are struggling with writing, give them sort of a crutch or a support until they can write independently. And then I hope you'll plan for one change that you might make in your own teaching that would increase your students' writing practice. Whoops! I went a little too far, sorry. Okay. Oh, there's that video again. Whoever might have a video up, I don't know if you all see it, but it's up on my screen and it's blocking what I can see. Do you all see that as well? I'm going to cut off the mic and maybe Jessica can tell me.
I don't see it on my end.
Okay, then I'm not going to worry about it, except I can't see my full screen and I can't get rid of the video. Okay, well, whatever. There's research that discusses the effective strategies for writing, and this came from, this is, Jessica, I can't see the bottom of my slide because of this, so I can't see everything that's on it. Oh, let's see. All right. I'm going to start again, guys. Sorry about this. All right, we talked about the, no, it's still there under relevant research. Well, we'll see what we can do. Let me move on to the next slide for a second and see if it's on all of them. No, it seems to be just on slide 3. So, okay, the 3 pieces of writing. There's Writing Next, which was a meta-analysis that looked at 62 different studies to see what what these studies tell us about effective instruction. And 11 different strategies were recommended for teachers for teaching writing. I put the URL up there that tells you. Thank you, whoever got rid of the video. Thank you. Okay, there are 11 different recommendations for effective instruction. The URL is there where you can find the study. You also can find all 3 of these studies that I've listed here on teal.ed.gov. We've got them on our website. The second study, Writing to Read, looks at how writing really helps people improve their reading, and it's an extremely interesting publication. And the last one is on how you use formative assessment to help your students improve their writing. So what I want to do in this next slide is look at the research-based recommendations, not all of them, but from Writing Next, the meta-analysis that came up with 11 different strategies. The ones that are so important and that I'm covering in this presentation today are to use collaborative writing with your students, and we'll talk about how you do that, and to teach pre-writing that helps your students to think about what they want to write rather than just starting to write sort of stream of consciousness, but to do some planning. And then from Writing to Read, the most important recommendation, at least for this presentation, but for your teaching, is to increase how much your students write. If your students are not getting enough practice across all content areas in writing, then writing remains a problem for them. So we've got to increase, and this is a recommendation, whether it's K-12 or adult ed or community college or post-sec, regular college. It turns out to be one of the biggest recommendations is that we have to get students to write more. Before we move into it, I just want to cover what I'm sure you know, and that's the elements of the writing process. We do planning, which is to put down our thoughts, and then we do some drafting, and then we do some revising. But in truth, this is not a sequential process where you move from planning to drafting to revising. All of these steps can go on at once and in a recursive manner. For example, I might start to write something and or plan and put down 3 or 4 thoughts what I'm going to write about. And when I get into drafting, I would start writing and say, oh, you know, I forgot something that I should have had in my outline. So I will go back to the pre-writing stage or the planning stage, add some more to my outline, and go back to drafting. But while I'm drafting, I might be thinking about what's the best way to say this, and I actually move into revising, but just a paragraph or 2 that I'm working on, and the rest of it is still a rough draft. Good writers tell you that they actually move back and forth among all of these stages all the time, so it's not sequential. Our students often, when they've written an essay and you've looked at it and given them some feedback, they think they're finished, and then when you ask them to revise it, mostly they don't like to do that. They like to think, well, it's done, I got feedback, let's move on to something else. But there's research that shows that good writers spend most of their time in revising, that the drafting stage is just when you're getting your first thoughts down and you're really refining in that last stage of revising. So we need to help our students understand how important that revising stage is. Okay, moving on. What this session is going to cover are 4 strategies. Quick writes, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on quick writes because it seems to be the easiest thing that teachers do, and that's where they'll spend a lot of their time. And I'm assuming, I will explain them, but I'm assuming that a lot of you already do quick writes and know what they are. Collaborative paragraphs we'll talk about, and then the biopoem, and then spend a good bit of time on writing frames. So that's what we're looking at for the rest of this hour, or hour and a half, whatever. Okay, so why use quick writes? Quick writes bring out the writer. It's a way to get students to put their ideas on paper and not be worried about somebody correcting the grammar, the punctuation, the phrasing. It's just to get their ideas out. And it's also to build the students' confidence. Students often don't know what they know until they begin writing, and they can actually see how good their writing is, or not. And then it develops writing fluency. If you use quick writing frequently, you will find that the students get better and better at it. My suggestion is to have your students keep a journal, a bound book, that they do some quick writes and other writing in every single class session. You will be surprised at the end of the semester how much their writing has improved. And I'll talk about how you do the quick writes in just a minute. We know from the study, Writing to Read, that when you write, you become a better reader because you're seeing and hearing language, and it helps you to improve your reading comprehension. And the interesting thing that research has found is that teachers grow as writers too, because when you assign a quick write to students, you're not exempt. The teacher is supposed to model and be writing at the same time. So let's talk about what quick writes look like. Wait a minute. Sorry. What you want to do, I don't know if I have the slide after this or not, but let me just explain. A quick write, you assign a student a general topic, and I would start with something that's comfortable for the student. Talk about themselves. So give them a quick write. 2 minutes, write about where you grew up. 2 minutes, another time, write about your family. 2 minutes, write about why you're in this class. It doesn't matter what it is, but you tell them in advance you're not going to collect it. They don't need to worry about punctuation, spelling, grammar, any of the mechanics. This is just to get their ideas out. The interesting thing about quick writes when we tried them in the Teal project is that many of our teachers from different states told us that if they let a class session go by where they didn't do a quick write, the students then called them on it and said, "Aren't we going to do our writing today?" And that's unusual. Most of the time our students are afraid and intimidated by writing. And why are they afraid? They're afraid because writing bears your thinking. You have to have something to say, you have to have some thought in order to write. And so it's intimidating to have to put your thoughts on paper if you haven't formalized or formulated your thinking yet. So using quick writes is a good way to get our students over that initial fear of putting pencil to paper. So I want to show you that you can use quick writes not just about writing about yourself, but in response to something that you do in class, like a poem that the students read, or something that you've taught in social studies or science. By the way, use quick writes in all content areas, not just language arts. So this is one, and I'm going to ask you, when I finish reading this poem to you, and I know you can read it too, to take 2 minutes, that's all, and on a piece of paper for yourself, write your response to this poem. Nobody is collecting them, but you'll get an experience of what it's like to do a quick write. So this is a poem that I like to use for quick writes because it evokes an emotion that almost all of us experience, and that's a great thing to do with quick writes. This is called Remembrance for My Grandmother, and it's by Clary Smith Chapman. So here's the poem. I remember we collected wild strawberries and made mud pies and built block houses and guided our cart down the supermarket aisle and took carrots and washed dishes and baked cookies and cut paper dolls and watched chickadees and played checkers and ate scrambled eggs and took our time on the stairs. And you never told me you were dying. I wanted the chance to say goodbye. Take 2 minutes and write anything that you want about this. Okay, that was just about 2 minutes. What I would like anybody to do is post your reaction to doing something like this. Post it to the chat function, and we'll look at those in just a little bit. But let me tell you, the responses I've had from this, I had a gentleman when I did this workshop for Florida, for the public schools, a gentleman who grew up in America, but his grandmother still lived in Puerto Rico, and he never had an opportunity to meet her until he spent a summer with her when he was 16. And so he wrote in his 2 minutes about what it was like to meet his grandmother for the first time and learn about his culture. And it was really an emotional kind of nice remembrance for him. Somebody else decided to write about her father because she had recently lost her father, and talked about what it means to lose somebody. Mostly people respond to this kind of a poem because everybody can relate it to someone close to them in their lives. This is a great way to get the students to start doing some writing about, about any topic, but to get them to start writing. What I've then done, after I've done a quick write on something that's related in class to something we've read or something we've been talking about, is just ask, who would be willing to share your 2-minute quick write to read it aloud? And I don't insist, I just ask. There's usually 3 or 4 people that just can't wait to read their quick writes. And what that does is not only build the confidence of the person who's written something, but it starts creating bonds with other students in the class, because somebody talks about an experience and somebody else says, oh, I had that exact same experience, and the next thing you know, they're chatting. When you build bonds among your students, you end up helping the students to persist in your classes. So quick writes can be used across content areas. The trouble we had with them in Teal is that teachers liked them so much that they didn't go beyond quick writes. Some of them. Some of the teachers were phenomenal and tried everything. But let me ask you, if you're not currently using quick writes, certainly try them, but after a number of weeks, try another one of the strategies we're going to talk about today. Okay, so that was about quick writes. And if you have experiences with quick writes and want to put in the chat anything about your experiences using quick writes, would love to have you share your thoughts on this. Okay, a collaborative paragraph. Years ago, I had tried collaborative paragraphs, but using the blackboard, and that's so cumbersome when you have a class of 15 or more students. You start with a sentence that you put up there, and then each student, one at a time, goes up, reads the sentence or sentences that are currently on the board, and writes another one. And by the time you're finished, you have a complete essay or paragraph anyway. I found it cumbersome to do with the whole class, so I now break the students into groups of 5, at least 5, no more than 7 though. And I'll start with a sentence on a piece of paper. And the one I usually use when I'm doing training, I steal from Snoopy. It was a dark and stormy night. You pass it along to one student. The student reads what's there and adds a sentence, but the sentence should follow logically from the first sentence. It shouldn't be totally off the wall. And then that student passes the paper on to the next student, who writes a new sentence. But they shouldn't be talking and plotting. Each student should just add his or her own thought. And then when the paper gets back to the original student who started, and again, I'm talking 5, 6, 7 students, not the whole class, then they look at their full paragraph. And if I've got a class of 20 students, I might have 4 different groups of 5. And so I'll ask one person to read the paragraph aloud. And the students in the different groups enjoy hearing how each group approached the particular topic. Some, when I start with that, it was a dark and stormy night. Some try to be really good and resolve it with, even though it's spooky and scary, that the lights came back on. They lost power, and then at the end the lights came back on. Others make it a spooky kind of thing that doesn't have a logical conclusion, but ends kind of it's just funny to listen to how the different groups approach this. What's nice about a collaborative paragraph is that a student who's a struggling writer is not exposed to the whole class. The student may write a sentence that's not as good or as polished as some of the others, but when the paragraph is read to the class, nobody knows which student wrote which paragraph. Collaborative paragraphs in the research say that it's a very, very good way to get our students to write and to not be afraid of writing, because they're not being exposed in terms of their deficits in writing. Okay, so if you've tried collaborative paragraphs, would love to know what your experience has been. And again, you can do this after you've taught something in history or science or whatever. You can say, okay, now a collaborative paragraph on the causes of World War I or whatever. It doesn't matter. You can tie it to content if you wish, but I like to start with things that are fun because it gets students comfortable with the exercise. Okay, the next one is using a biopoem. I really like biopoems because when you use the template, the students are not writing sentences yet. So you say to them, here's the template. You pass this out to everyone, just this template. And you say on the top line, write your first name. On the very last line, write your last name. And now, on line 1, write down 4 adjectives that describe you. Or if you're doing a biopoem of somebody else, a friend or a spouse or a parent or whatever, it could be another person, but 4 adjectives that describe whoever's name is on the top line. Now, you're not writing sentences, you're just putting down, you know, conscientious, dependable, whatever adjectives you're putting down. Then on the next line you put down son or daughter of, or you could say wife or husband of, or you could say mother or father of, or you could say friend of, doesn't matter. And then you list 3 things that you love, 3 things that you feel, 3 things that you give, 3 things that you fear, 3 things you'd like to see, and then a very brief description of where you live, and then your last name. So this is the template. I want to give you some examples of what a biopoem looks like. And what's neat about the biopoem is that after you get all these adjectives down, you actually have the skeleton for writing a paragraph that's a descriptive paragraph. But let's look at some of the examples. This one I didn't do. This one I stole from the Read Write Think website, but I think this is so good. It's a biopoem about Scout Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. So if you look at this, and oops, we just lost the video. I mean the slides. Help. Whoops. I think it's coming back. I'm going to ask Jessica or Camille for some help.
Hi, Marianne. We're working on it. Somebody accidentally hit application share, so somebody in the webinar is sharing their screen. It's your screen. If this is your screen, please X out of it for us.
Hi, everyone. It's still not up. Please don't go away. We'll be with you in just a minute. Cute cat and dog up there. Ah, thank you. Appreciate it. I hope you're all still there. Okay, so this biopoem of Scout Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird I think is really kind of cool, and it follows the template. It's Scout, tomboy, brave, intelligent, loving, sister of Jem, lover of justice, chewing gum, reading, and Alabama summers, who feels outraged when her dad is maligned, happiness when school is over, and fright on a dark Halloween night, who needs her dad's acceptance, Jem's loyalty, and Dill's admiration, who gives friendship easily, black eyes to cousins, and sassy words to Calpurnia, who fears Boo's dark house, owls in the night, and giving her open palms to the teacher, who would like to see all mockingbirds sing freely, whether they're creatures of flight, shy neighbors, or kind handymen, resident of Macomb, Alabama, Finch. What I like about this is that once the students put down their adjectives, and by the way, this can be collaborative. You've read something in class and you say, okay, now write a biopoem about this character. It could be a character in history, it could be a character in a novel you've read, doesn't matter. But you can get them collaboratively to write the biopoem. So what are some adjectives about Scout? And they contribute different adjectives. She's a sister of Jem. What is she like? So, you know, you can actually get all of the content here, but you're not finished. Now you've given the student the backbone to actually write an essay. Our students are afraid, as I said earlier, afraid of writing because they're not sure they have anything to say. Once you've given them all of this, oh my word, they've got loads to say. And if you've got different groups of students collaboratively coming up with a biopoem about the same character, it's fantastic because then you can have them read to the class and see the differences in what they've written. So this is one sample biopoem. The next one you can do about, doesn't have to be a person. You could do a science class and say, okay, write me a biopoem about a frog. I also took this one from the Read Write Think website. Then I'm not going to read it to you. This will be archived and you can read this later. The next one, I wanted to do a biopoem of Florida. So what I had to do to learn enough about Florida, yeah, I've been there lots of times, but I didn't know enough about the different characteristics. So I had to look up things. I knew it was lush and semi-tropical and had lots of beaches, and I know the states that border it, so it's a relative of Georgia and Alabama. And I know it has oranges, and I know it has the Fountain of Youth and the Swanee River. But then I had to look up information. I went to the web and looked up information about Florida. So now the first one, my husband would kill me if I said I didn't know that because my husband went to University of Florida. But who feels proud of the Florida Gators? And excuse me, those of you who are Seminole fans, pleased, now I didn't know this, pleased by its no tax on income, grateful for its tourism and space industries, who needs to feel the Atlantic and Gulf Stream, Gulf Stream breezes, to see the Everglades, to thrill in water sports. And then the last part I've used on every biopoem for every state I've ever done because this doesn't change from state to state. Who fears a rising crime rate, the housing bust, rising unemployment, who gives state aid to the needy, support to the governor, education to the students, who'd like to see test scores increase, homelessness disappear, the economy improve, the United States, the Sunshine State. I've done this for 5 or 6 different states where I've done training, and people, the teachers generally like it because it's an easy topic to give to your students, not with all of the stuff in it that I wrote. Their poems will be different, of course, but it's a fun thing to have the students work on together. So think about using some kind of a biopoem. To recap, you use the template first so they get all of these phrases, and then you ask them, after they've read their biopoem, to work collaboratively to write a paragraph about whatever the topic, Florida or frogs, or it doesn't matter, a character from literature. So think about biopoems. The students generally like them. I would ask you except you'd have to type it in the chat function what strategies you've tried to get your students to write more, and if they've been successful, and if your students enjoyed them. So if you have any wisdom to share, please do put it in the chat function, because these aren't the only strategies that work. Teachers that have been doing this for a while have come up with some wonderful strategies, so please do share. Okay. I'm moving on now to the use of frames. Frames are extremely important to help the student who's afraid of coming up with some thoughts, not knowing what to say. What a frame does is provide the structure without the detail. It's similar to a cloze, C-L-O-Z-E, that we use for reading, where there are, like, every 5th or 8th or 10th word is blanked out of a paragraph in a cloze, and the students have to come up with the word that fits in there, and that's a test of reading comprehension. Well, this is very much like that, only the part that's given to the student are the key words without the details. So there are a lot of blanks, and I'll show you some examples. What this does is provide a structure so that the learners can concentrate not on the form of what I want to say, but they can concentrate on what they're going to say, not on what the form is. For example, if you're doing a compare-contrast, students get lost in how do I do compare-contrast. I'll show you, I'll give you examples, but a frame gives them the backbone for writing it, and then they just put in the two things that they're comparing and contrasting. Dogs and cats are the same in this way, they're different in that way. And I'll give you examples, I'll show you. But what these frames do is help the students think before they write so that it helps them compose their text. So here's an example. This is a frame for summarizing. I found let's take To Kill a Mockingbird. I found To Kill a Mockingbird interesting for several reasons. I discovered that, or I learned that. I learned about some facts about racism in such and such a period in the South. I also learned whatever about a brave young girl. It was interesting that it doesn't matter what you say, finally, and so you can see. And here you are summarizing. What this does is not at all give the student the gist of the writing. It just gives them a frame or a skeleton to put the thoughts in. So I found something interesting for several reasons. I discovered what, and they have to say what they discovered. There's several different frames, and we'll talk about them. You can use these or you can change them, because it's not a definite that you have to say I discovered and I learned. You can do summarizing in a lot of different ways. So let me move on to the next one. There are two types of frames. There are frames that help pre-writing, that help the students think about what they're going to say. And there's frames that help with writing the first draft. And the writing frames help the students gain confidence in writing. And we'll look at both types of frames. Here's a writing frame for problem solution. I want to explain, this is a note to your boss, I want to explain why I didn't do such and such that you asked for and get it in by the deadline. There's several reasons for this. The chief reason is that I was already working on such and such that had another deadline, and I couldn't do both at once. But I tried. I really started working on it. But another reason is my computer got hung up, and so we spent a couple of hours with IT trying to get that fixed. And another reason is, but I promise I will get it done, and now you can see why. Well, you can use this. I want to explain what acid rain is. I want to explain the reasons, for the Afghan war. It doesn't matter what your topic is, but here's problem solution. Your problem, I want to explain what. That's your problem. Then here are some reasons, and at the end, here's your solution. Cause and effect is another one that's a good writing frame. Keep in mind that when our students take the GED tests, they're going to need some of these frames in order to write. And what you do is give the student lots of experience using these frames, but gradually, say you're working on cause and effect. You start with this full frame, but after a number of different topics that they're writing for cause and effect, what was the effect of World War I, or what's the effect of adding an acid to this solution, or it doesn't matter what your topic is, but use cause and effect over and over and over again, and each time that you do it, take away a little bit of the frame. So one explanation is that, and then leave it so that they write in, or you can say one explanation is that and the evidence is, and then leave the next part blank so that they realize, oh yeah, now I have to give an alternative explanation. And then finally at the end of the alternative explanations, I think the most likely is, as you pull away the frame, the student gets, but gradually, the student gets more and more comfortable with this particular way that they can write cause and effect. And there's several different types of frames, so you need to just keep using them throughout the year until the students are comfortable with them. You don't have to stick exclusively with problem solution or cause and effect, but it helps because giving them a lot of different frames sometimes is overwhelming. So using one for a period of time and then moving on to the next frame is a good idea. Here's a sample writing frame for procedure and sequence. I took into an ESL class once a head of cabbage and a grater and some mayonnaise and vinegar and sugar and salt and pepper. And I said, we're going to make coleslaw. So this is procedure. I want to explain how to make coleslaw. To begin with, you get a head of cabbage and you get a grater and you grate it until it's nice and, you know, this consistency. And then after that, you add, and here's all the things you add next and then. And the final result is, you know, get a fork and grab a plate of coleslaw. It was interesting because we had that in my ESL class. Interesting how many of our students had never tasted coleslaw before. But see, when you do a demo like that, you can get them to write. You can get them to talk. There's so many things you can do with using a real hands-on demonstration. So this is a writing frame for procedure and sequence. I want to give you a little bit of the background on writing frames. Nichols, back in 1980, talked about writing frames and said that they help the writers use the right kind of text organization to summarize information, and the information they put in adheres to a basic structure, usually compare, contrast, or cause and effect, or problem and solution. I asked the researchers that were on our TEAL project, there were 10 really well-known writing researchers and professors, I asked them about whether we should include frames in the TEAL work, and they said, absolutely, because intuitively you know that frames work. They're a very big help for students who are struggling with what to say. The caveat that they have is that there's not a lot of good research on writing frames that prove their effectiveness. But that's only because nobody has done the research besides Nichols. It's not to say that they don't work. And so all of these professors said, yes, certainly teach the frames, but just know that there's not the same kind of degree of research on writing frames as there is on increasing writing fluency and other kinds of things. So if anybody out there is thinking about a master's or a doctoral thesis, doing something on frames is an area that needs to be done. I just wanted to throw that out. Okay, what's interesting and good about frames is that they prompt the student to organize the thinking because they're giving you partially completed sentences. And over time, as I said, you take away some of the structure, and eventually the student should be able to compare different tribes of Indians, compare different housing structures, compare cities and towns. It doesn't matter what the topics are. What matters is that they now know how to do a compare and contrast. And frames are great because you can use them in any content area. Okay, here's a graphic organizer that is for pre-writing. So if you ask the student, what happened that led into World War I or the Korean War or whatever, or they can do something about their own timeline. You know, list the important events in your life and what happened. So the year you were born, and the year you entered school, and the year you moved, and the year you got your first job, and the year you had your first baby. So they have a graphic organizer that's a timeline, and now they take that and they write a paragraph. So these are giving the students, using graphic organizers and frames, you're giving the students the gist of what they want to put into their essay, so it's not stream of consciousness. So this is what the graphic organizer looks like. This is what a chronological order frame looks like. So you can say, I was born in such and such, and not prior to this, but following that, you know, and you can go on with the, this is what happened. You can go on with the sequence of events. Or you can say, at the beginning of, well, I'm trying to think, a chronological order. It could be anything that you're looking at, timeline, and asking the students to write in chronological order. One of the things I did years ago that was pretty successful in my class, I took a roll of paper that was only about maybe 2 feet wide, but I strung it all the way across the room on all 4 walls, and I put a timeline up that was starting with around 1945 and the end of World War II. And I put time, just years, across the top, all the way around this wall, and put in some significant kinds of things. So 45 was the end of World War II, and 52, I'm not sure if I got my years right, the end of Korean War, and then 60, Kennedy was elected, and 63, Kennedy was assassinated, and 74, I think, was the end of the Vietnam War, and such. You know, so I had markers. And then I asked the students to go up and put in significant events in their own lives and write their names. So people, it didn't matter if it was year I was born, if they didn't want to share that, year I got married, year I got my first job, year I got a house or a place to live or whatever. So students went up and they wrote that. And it didn't have to be large that you could read it from across the room. It just had to be inclusive of every student. And then I asked them to write a chronological order of their own lives, but to relate it to what was going on in the world. So, you know, I was born, like my son could say, I was born in 1973, right before the Vietnam War ended. And he could go on and talk from there about things that happened in his life. So don't think about just using a frame. Think about relating it to the students' lives, because it becomes more interesting for them. So this is a chronological order frame. Telling the news frame is one of the best ones, I think. Everybody, even if they're not reading newspapers, is hearing what's going on in the news. And this week, of course, it's been the Boston Marathon. So what's the topic of the news you're going to tell? When did it happen? All they're writing here is a few words. When did it happen? Who created the news? Where did it happen? What happened? Why did it happen? So they write in a few words in each of these. And now they've got an order, the way newspaper reporters write. They've got an order that they can put together a very short paragraph that tells you something that happened in the news. And what's really neat about this is that there's no end of topics. When I was doing this training in Florida last June, I think it was, the Trayvon Martin case was a big case at the time. And so you look at this, what's the topic of the news, when did it happen, who created it, where did it happen. These are really neat things to do with your students. And again, across all content areas, don't just keep writing relegated to language arts. Oops, I'm sorry, I hit that too fast. Okay. So a pre-writing frame, one of the ones that's very good to use is a descriptor. You can bring something into your classroom, set it on the table, and ask the student under the what line, just what is it, okay? Or you can ask them to pick their own object. Once I brought in a vase with a rose in it, and I set it on the table and said, describe it. So they have to tell you, what does it look like, smell like, feel like, taste like, sound like, if those apply. What's it made of? What are its parts? What does it make you think of? When you see a rose, sometimes it's happy situations, sometimes it's you know, sad situations. Compare it. What's it similar to? Is it similar or different from a lily or a peony or any other flower? What can you do with it? And why is it a good thing or a bad thing? You can pick anything, an automobile, a hat, it doesn't matter, and get your students to practice describing it using all of these. And if they write several sentences, this is what it looks like, feels like, tastes like, you can ask them, now pick your best sentence from each of those, describing it, analyzing it, associating it, and put it together and give me a paragraph that tells me all about a rose or a car or a piece of luggage or an airplane. It doesn't matter. Okay, so that's the descriptor frame. I'm going to stop for just a minute and take a look at some of the things that people are saying on in the chat function. Incarcerated students are provided 10 vocabulary words weekly. They're required to create a cohesive paragraph using all 10 words on the weekly assessment, and the words appear unrelated until they develop the paragraph. That's great. I like that idea because you'll get different paragraphs from each one, but they'll tie them together in a story. That's nice. That's a nice idea. And then let's see. Don says that every Friday his students have to write 10 sentences or so for a story, and then he reads them to the class anonymously. That's good too. I like that. I'm just going up to see if there's others. I think the rest of it is all about technical issues. Okay. Thank you for sharing those ideas. Okay, this frame that's up here now on slide 26 is about problem solving. You can ask your students, here's a problem we have, let's come up with some solutions. And in one of the classes at a community college where parking is a real problem on campus and students are frequently late or they get frustrated and turn around and go home because they can't actually get on campus, the teacher said to the class, I think this is one of our teachers in Texas, I'm not sure, she said to the class, what are some of the possible solutions to getting you to class on time because of the parking situation? The students just brainstorm as a class, and the teacher writes down on the board or the overhead each idea. You don't judge the ideas. It's just like in a brainstorming activity. You accept everything and you write them down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however many ideas. Now you have this rating code at the bottom where A is an excellent idea, B is very good, C is average, and D is below average. The students don't have to agree. You give them a grid like this and you say, for you, write down what's the best of these 4 ideas and give it an A. And it may be different for each person. Some people may say, the best idea is for me to take a bus because parking on campus is impossible. Somebody else may say the best idea is to take this issue to the administration and let them do something about it. But other people will be uncomfortable with that. So you've got all these ideas on the board. You ask them to evaluate them, and then at the bottom put down the best solution for you. And then you ask them to write a very brief paragraph about what the problem is and what their solution is. So this is a pre-writing frame that gets their ideas down. The neat thing about having discussions with the students before they start writing is that it generates ideas for them. I have a daughter who's now, 35, but when she was in 2nd grade, she drove me out of my mind because she never wanted to write. She would sit and stare at a piece of paper when teacher gave them a writing assignment, and she would struggle and struggle and struggle because she thought that the sentence that went down had to be perfect. And it doesn't. You just need to start writing. And I would tell her again and again, just start writing. You can clean it up later. Just start writing some ideas. Get some thoughts down. And she would just stare at this blank piece of paper. Well, you know, well, I have to say, she's 35 now and she outgrew that, thank the Lord. But when I started teaching adult ed, I recognized that same tendency in our students. You give them something to write and they sit and they stare at the paper, which is why giving them frames or doing some of these other activities like the biopoem or collaborative paragraph is so very important to get them past that fear that they have of writing. Okay, so here's a pre-writing frame. This is a terrific, I think, graphic organizer to use for compare-contrast. You all know the Venn diagram. So I went online to research the difference between flowering and non-flowering plants and found a really good essay that talked about the differences. So I put on here, under non-flowering plants, they evolved from algae in the ocean, and the flowering plants developed on line. The non-flowering developed 300 million years before the flowering plants. The non-flowering use spores or reproduce asexually, whereas the flowering plants need pollination and fertilization, and they produce seeds. They produce seeds in the fruit, and the non-flowering plants produce seeds in cones. And then the non-flowering plants really don't have an internal means to send water through the system or nutrients, whereas flowering plants have an intricate system for that. That's how they're different. In the middle, where the two circles overlap, flowering and non-flowering plants are both living things. They have roots, stems, and leaves, and they produce seeds. This is all the information that your students need to write, compare, contrast, and I'll show you the frame on the next slide. But think about this. You can look at what's the difference between Europe and the United States involvement in World War I, or what are the causes of World War I and the differences with World War II, or the Vietnam War, or the Korean War, or the Afghan War, whatever. You can just list in each of the circles the two things you want to compare and contrast. And as a whole group, don't let the students individually come up with these thoughts. As a whole class, have the students brainstorm what goes under the circle on the left, what goes under the circle on the right, how are they the same. And after you get all the ideas up there, then give them a frame like this. So to go through this, flowering plants are different from non-flowering plants in several ways. First, flowering plants evolved such and such, or 100 and however many million years old, while non-flowering plants are 400 and so many million years old. Additionally, flowering plants have an intricate vascular system that sends nutrients through their entire system, whereas the non-flowering plants do not. They're alike in that they're both living things. They both have stems and roots and seeds. And so it's evident that there are differences. I don't know how you want to end it. But you can use the Venn diagram, and you can use this compare-contrast frame, and you could use this all year on so many different topics and get your students writing and not being afraid to write because they get comfortable with it. After you've done this 100 times, you can take away part of the frame and just say, what's the first thing that we do here? And they'll say, well, you have to compare this and this and say that they're the same in this way or they're different in that way. And then you give the details. So the students learn to do this, but only with a lot of practice. I just want to tell you, years ago, I ran the National Adult Literacy and Learning Disability Center, and we developed Bridges to Practice. We had a research arm at the University of Kansas, and they interviewed randomly adult ed students all across the country, teachers all across the country, and asked them what they think is the number of times you repeat something before the student masters it. And the average that most teachers said was, about 3 times, maybe 4. In reality, for students, for all of our students, but especially those that have any kind of learning disability, 10, 11, 12 times is not too many times to repeat something before it's at the level of mastery for the student. So I just want to encourage you that if you pick something like a compare-contrast frame and you do 2 or 3 different topics, don't think that they've learned how to do it. They haven't. They're getting there, but they need lots more practice, and you need to start pulling away the frame gradually so that they can do this comfortably. Okay, next one. This slide shows the different types of frames that there are. So a definition or a descriptive frame is, a rose is a kind of flowering plant, whatever. A sequence. First you do this when you're making coleslaw, then you do that, and then you do this, and finally you sit down and you eat it. Cause and effect. Acid rain happens because of, smog and particles in the air and whatever. Problem solution, and then compare contrast. Think about using these, and as I cautioned earlier, maybe not all at once. Maybe get them comfortable with one kind of frame before you introduce others. Or you could get different groups of students to work on different kinds of frames. And then what happens is when they get very comfortable using their frame that they're assigned, compare, contrast, or cause effect, they can actually work with other students. So you can change the makeup of the groups, have a couple of people join the group that's done problem solution and work with them. It's a neat way to get the students to interact with one another. So these are the different types of frames. Before we go on, I want to mention that narrative, writing a story, is not something that's going to be asked for on the GED. It's the least used of all of the types of, the genres that our students are going to have to write to. In the Common Core state standards, the students have to do information and explanatory and argumentative type writing where they take an opinion and support it. The narrative is very least used. So this is just to tell you that, just so you're aware of it and can use this if you want with your students, every piece of fiction, whether it's a novel or a play or a short story or even a poem, usually follows the story frame. Somebody, that's the main person, the antagonist in your story, wants something, whether it's a job, whether it's love and acceptance, whether it's to move, whether it's a child, it doesn't matter. Somebody wants something. But, and the but is the problem that comes up in every single story. Something is getting in the way. And then the so is the resolution. you can take any story, it doesn't matter, and use this SWBS, somebody wanted but so. So the story takes place, if you're using To Kill a Mockingbird, in Maycomb, Alabama, and Scout Finch is a character in the story who, and you can say, and a problem occurs when, and after that, you know, and her dad gets in hot water, and then after that the problem is solved when, and the story ends with. So you can use this for any kind of narrative, any kind of fiction story. I don't use it much because it's not required on the GED, but it's still nice to go over this with the students every once in a while. If you read a piece of literature, you can get them to use this frame and give you a summary of what happened in the piece of literature that you've read. Okay. At the end of every class, it's a really nice thing to ask your students, they don't have to put their names on it, but to fill out these cards anonymously and give them to you. This is a frame, and it's a formative assessment tool for you as the teacher, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So the student writes, the most important thing I learned in class today, and they put it down, and it doesn't have to be a full sentence. The question that still remains in my mind at the end of today's lesson. This comes from a class at Harvard. I happened to find this on the internet and thought it was kind of cool. The reason it's a formative assessment tool, you collect these, they're exit cards. When your students leave your class, they have to turn this into you, or they don't get to leave. When you sit down and you read these, sometimes you will be just shocked at the things that the students thought that they learned, that you thought you had presented so clearly, and they got a very different idea. Some of them, of course, will tell you wonderful stuff, but what this will do for you, without knowing who wrote it, is tell you where there are still problems, so that the next class you can go back and reinforce the learning and make sure that there's not misunderstanding. And then the question that remains in my mind at the end of the lesson are things that the students still didn't understand or want to know more about. This kind of a formative assessment tool helps you to catch the problems that the students are having with comprehension before you just, without realizing it, move on to the next topic and you don't realize that the students haven't quite learned this one yet. So this is a really nice way to get them to write, but also to give you a sense of what they're learning and how much they still need to learn about on that topic. This is a more complex formative assessment tool that's also an exit card. I like the first one that I showed you better. I think this is a little complex for our students, but today's lesson was about such and such, and a key idea was, and it's important because, and another key idea is, and this matters because, and in summary, this is today's lesson. I'm going to go back for a minute. I like this one a whole lot better for our students. It's simpler, easier, and they have to fill it out before they leave your class. But feel free, you can use this one as well, or any other. You can change the stems in here and get them to tell you other things if you wish. But this is a really nice formative assessment tool to use to see how the students are doing in your class. Okay, before we end this, I want to talk about teacher modeling and guided practice and the gradual release, excuse me, gradual release practice that you should be using with your students. When you teach the students anything, the first thing you do is model it. You show them how you do something. While you're doing that modeling, you should be thinking aloud so the students can hear your thought process. So let's see, I'm going to do a compare-contrast on flowering plants and non-flowering plants. So the first thing I want to do is write flowering plants are similar to non-flowering plants in that they're both living things and yada, 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 yada. And then the next thing I want to do is tell you how they are different. And so you do that. You're thinking aloud while you're writing the compare-contrast. You do that a few times until the students get the idea of the process you're using. Then you move on to collaborative writing with the student, where you say to the student, you help me. Now the first thing I have to do is what? And the student says, well, you have to tell the two things that you're comparing or contrasting. Oh yeah, okay, so I write this, and then what's the next thing I do? And the student helps you. So this is now not just you doing it, it's you doing it and the student helping. Then you move down to scaffolding or supported writing, where you say to the student, okay, you try it and I'll help. So the student starts out, well, okay, I know I have to compare and contrast flowering and non-flowering plants, so I'll start with this sentence. And then the student gets stuck, and you're providing guidance. Now you as the teacher is supporting the student until the student gets comfortable with this. You do this, repeat the cycle again and again and again until finally the student is writing independently. This modeling and guided practice can be used not just with writing, with anything that you're teaching where there's a process that the student has to follow. So let me show you the next slide. This gradual release model that Fisher and Fry, Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry have published actually comes from a much earlier model, and I'll show you that on the next slide. But the reason I like this is that if you look at this, you've got two triangles. The one that's inverted has teacher responsibility at the top, and that's much wider. It's a much larger function for the teacher at the beginning. As you move down through the lesson, the guided instruction, the collaborative writing, and the independent writing, the teacher's role gets narrower and narrower until the teacher isn't doing very much at all. Contrary to that, on the student side, which is the triangle that's standing upright, at the very top, the student is listening. This is where the teacher is doing and the student is listening. The next line, guided instruction, the teacher is still doing the work, but the student is listening and participating, where the student is helping. So this is us doing it together. And then the collaborative one, the student is doing the writing and the teacher is coaching and helping the student. And then the bottom line, the student is doing it alone or independently. This is the Fisher and Fry model of gradual release. They get all the credit for it, but Pearson and Gallagher in 1983 are the ones who actually came up with this. And I'm showing you these three different slides because it doesn't matter which model you're using. They all do the same thing. They all start with teacher modeling with the student listening, and then teacher demonstrating while the student helps, and then the student doing the work while the teacher is guiding, and then finally the student doing it alone. This is the first one that was developed, the Pearson and Gallagher in 1983, and I happen to like this one, but it's a little bit more complex. The Fisher and Fry one looks easier to look at and understand. So just think, I do, and it's I do and you watch, I do and you help, and then it's you do and I help, and then you do alone. So think about that, and don't just do it once. Do it again and again and again, because that's how the student is going to get to mastery of the content. Okay, we've talked about a lot of things, and what always concerns me when I do professional development is that people listen and they understand it, what we're talking about, but if they don't set a goal for doing something in their practice, it's just a hit-and-run workshop where, I come in and I talk to you for an hour and a half and I go away and it's business as usual for you. So I would like you to think about, and no, nobody is collecting this, but I'd like you to think about the things we talked about today. We covered quick writes, we covered the biopoem, we covered the collaborative paragraph, and finally we covered frames. Think about one of those and set a goal for something you want to try in your teaching practice. I think it's important for teachers to set goals. You know, it's the same, no goals, no gain, or no success. If you don't try to make a change, it's just going to be the same. And I like the Yogi Bear, if you don't know where you're going, you won't know when you get there. But I also like this phrase that I found somewhere. I don't know who said this. The difference between a goal and a dream is the written word. So for yourself, keep a teacher journal. Write down a goal, something you're going to try in class, and after you try it, say you try a collaborative paragraph or a biopoem, just jot a few notes down for yourself. What went well and what could I change? This becomes, nobody asks to see it. This is your journal to help you improve your teaching. The reason we want you to set a goal is because change is mandatory. It just happens. It's a constant, but growth is optional. You don't have to grow and learn new things, but you all do. That's why you're on this webinar in the first place. And again, not to belabor this, but no goals, no glory. And I like Yoda's do or do not. There is no try. So when you write a goal, don't say, I'm going to try to do this. Say, I will use quick writes in such and such, or I will use a biopoem, or I will use a compare-contrast frame. So, you know, I'm not going to belabor this. The performance gap that everybody has is the difference between where you're currently functioning right now as a teacher and where you want to be. And that's your goal, where you want to be. So to end this, think to yourself, what one strategy do I want to try? Don't try them all because you'll go crazy. I mean, you can over a period of time, but start with one, and when you get comfortable with that strategy, try another. So how are you going to do it? How often are you going to use quick writes? How are you going to monitor how this is going in the class? What you're doing and what you need to change as you teach this, and how your students are doing. How are you going to know whether it's having an effect on student learning? Before I go on, I want to see if there are any other comments in the chat box. I think, oh, cool. Somebody uses exit cards for Math Daily, required the names on the cards to identify the students who needed extra help the next day. That's nice. This activity changed my teaching for the good. Thank you so much, Kay, for saying that. I think that's great. That it changed your teaching. I think it's fine if you require their names. I don't do it when I'm asking them what they learned or didn't learn, because I use it as a formative assessment tool. But the way you're using it is fine, so that you know who needs extra help. Or you could make it voluntary. You know, if you need some extra help, please put your name on this. Okay, good. So please think about planning a change in your teaching. And then I just put in some corny slides. I love Escher's work where one thing evolves into another, and this is fish evolving into geese or the other way. And I just want to know at this point, are there questions? Are there comments? People can write in the chat box. Somebody said, great practical tools that you can use. I'm so glad. Yeah, and I think Jessica will get the slides up so that people can copy these and use them. Maybe I should turn this over to Jessica and let you talk about where people can find the materials.
Marianne, what was that last part you said?
Oh, people are asking about getting the materials, and can you tell them how they find this slide presentation when this is over?
Yeah, we generally say they'll be available within 2 weeks up on the FLC website under our webinar section. I'll try and get them up sooner. We're right in the middle of planning for a big conference, but I'll try my best to get them up as soon as possible so you have the materials to use. I do want to mention something, because I know several people mentioned that they wanted proof of attending for continuing education. And I also just need to know who's on the webinar. So I have several people who either signed in with like a first, like a first name and then just a last initial, and then some people who didn't put their name in when they signed in. I'm just going to quickly read the names of the people I know for sure that are on here, and if you do not hear your name read, please just type it into the chat box. That way I can just copy and paste your name. So I have Carla Heimer, Carmen Mate, and I apologize if I say your name incorrectly, Diane Bauman, Glennis Pounds, Irene Henderson, Kay Yoder, Lisa Libby, Marjorie Lloyd, Marcia Evans, Pamela Marshall, Roger, and I didn't have a last name, Ronald Latronica, Rosa Barkley, and then B. Perry, so I didn't get a first name on that. So if you did not hear me call your name, your name doesn't show up on the participants. You were one of the people who logged in just as the webinar name, so if you please type your name in for me. Marianne, it looks like somebody did have a question for you. It said, could you give an idea how you can start doing writing in a literacy adult ESOL class?
Sure. There are so many different ways. If you've got a basic level group just learning writing, ask them, keep the topics related to themselves, and ask them to start a quick write where you're probably not going to get complete sentences, but they'll tell you some things about themselves. You'll mostly get vocabulary. And then ask them, you could use language experience. Once you've got the vocabulary and you've helped them with the spelling and all, you can ask them to tell you the story of when they came to this country, or whatever, their favorite food. It doesn't matter. But something that they can talk about. Get them to tell you the story. Get them first to think about what they want to say so that it's logical, and then ask them to tell you the story, or another student, a more advanced student, the story. You write it down, and then you go over the story with the student so that they see the language and it's their own words, and then you can give them a frame. It's like a close where you take out some of the words and you let them put in the words, and then you ask them to write it without having all of that in front of them. I realize that that's a lot if the student has almost no language at all. At the intermediate level, of course, it's a lot easier. One of the things I like to do for the sense that to know that they understand is, and this is for reading, but then you can do it with writing, you cut up a paragraph into sentence strips, and you give one strip to each student, but they haven't seen it in order, and you ask them to puzzle through what should be the first sentence, what's the next, so they're thinking logically. Then you can take that same topic and you can ask them, you can remove some of the words, you can remove some of the sentences so that they see the paragraph with the second sentence removed, and they're supposed to tell you what the gist of that sentence was. It doesn't have to be perfect. It could just be to get them started. The biopoem, I think, is terrific because so many times the ESL students just use vocabulary words, and they'll say, you know, house, pretty, if they're very beginning students. So with the biopoem, they could actually use the adjectives, you know, fill in all of those ideas, and then gradually build sentences around each one of them. So these techniques can also be used with ESL students. I have to tell you, though, the research that was done was not on ESL students. The research on writing was using the native-born American speaker or Canadian speaker. But your gut just tells you that using some of these things like a biopoem or collaborative paragraph is also going to work for ESL. I mean, why shouldn't it? But just know that there's not research on different groups at this point because it's also new. I don't know if that's enough, if that helps, but certainly you can use these with ESL students. Other questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to turn this back to you, Jessica. I think that, you know, I'm sorry that we had a few technical issues, but I'm so glad people stayed with it. And just see if you have anything that you want to say in closing. But thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you everyone for participating. If you do have any other questions that you think of, please email me and then I can forward those on to Dr. Corley, and hopefully she can answer those and send a response to me that I can forward to the group. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you are interested in, somebody mentioned like a certificate for continuing education or proof of professional development, please just respond to the email that I sent you on Monday and let me know that you would like that. I will be sending out a survey in the next probably couple of weeks about this. Once you complete your survey and I get your response back, then I can send you your certificate. If you have any other questions, please feel free to email me. And I hope you'll have a great day. I'm going to go ahead and sign off then.
Thanks, everybody.